Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. Welcome to today's webinar, Next Level Community Engagement, from Ad-Hoc Efforts to Institutionalized Value. This webinar is brought to you by the Science for Africa Foundation in partnership with the Mesh Community Engagement Network and the Global Health Network, University of Oxford. My name is Waila Jacinta, and I'll be chairing the webinar today. Before we begin, I would like to go through some housekeeping. Firstly, this session is being recorded. The recording will be shared in the coming weeks on the Global Health Network platform, so you can review and share the materials. These materials can be found using the link that has just been shared in the chat. The webinar will be held in English. To automatically translate the speech to subtitles in your chosen language, navigate to the closed captions function and select your language. Please use chat feature for introduction or to report any technical issues you may be experiencing. The Global Health Network team will aim to assist you with this. To interact with the panel, please use the Q&A feature to post your questions and comments. You may do so anonymously. Due to the number of participants, your videos and microphones have been disabled. If there's an opportunity to ask a question, you will be required to raise your hand and we will be able to enable your microphone. We have dedicated time allocated for the Q&A, so we'll try to get through as many questions as possible. If we don't have time for all the questions, we will compile and address them after the session. We are delighted to see participants from around the globe: Uganda, Nigeria, United Kingdom, India, Burkina Faso, Nepal, Brazil, and many others, as you can see on the screen. I'm now delighted to be joined today by my colleagues, Ms. Lilian N. Mutengu, who is a Senior Program Manager at the Science for Africa Foundation, Ms. Cherewa Boateng, the Community and Public Engagement Focal Person at the West Africa Center for Cell Biology of Infectious Pathogens, that is WACBIP, University of Ghana, under the Developing Excellence in Leadership, Training and Science in Africa, abbreviated as Deltas Africa 2. Next, we'll have Big Zero, the Program Manager at the African Mental Health Research Initiative, Amari 2, from the University of Zimbabwe. He also is under the Deltas Africa 2. And finally, but not least, we'll have Professor Judith Kamoto from the Lilongwe University of Agriculture and Natural Resources in Malawi. We'll have a brief look at our agenda this afternoon. So we've begun with the introductions. Next, we'll have a presentation from Ms. Mutengu, followed by Cherewa Boateng, then Bigit Zero, and Judith Kamoto. Then finally, we'll have the Q&A session, and then the closing remarks at the end of the webinar. So we will begin the program for today. I would like to welcome Ms. Lilian N. Mutengu to set the scene for today's webinar. Lilian is the Senior Program Manager for Science and Communication and Engagement at the Science for Africa Foundation. She leads initiatives that promote effective communication of research and fosters meaningful dialogue between scientists, policymakers, and the public across Africa to strengthen evidence-informed decision-making and inclusive scientific engagement. Lilian will be talking about funding for community engagement. Are we entrenching existing narratives? Welcome, Lilian.
Thank you very much, Waila. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining us from. And welcome to today's session. I would like to start us off to share or speak from the funder perspective on this topic. As you can see on the slide, the title is Funding for Community Engagement. And the question I am asking is, are we entrenching existing narratives? The title of the webinar, as you saw, is basically to see how we are moving from ad hoc community engagement to institutionalized value. So quickly, my talk is going to focus on 3 areas. One is what is community engagement with global health research? I think it's very important for us to try and understand if we're speaking from the same page. And then what do we mean when we say next level community engagement? And finally, ask the question, what is the approach from the funders in terms of this work? Are we entrenching, the existing narratives, or are we working to shift the paradigm? So quickly going to the definition, and the reason I decided to do this deliberately, not to delve into defining the concepts, is because there is a myriad of definitions. And so I just wanted to really highlight the fact that community engagement is a very dynamic concept. You will not find a single definition or a very simple definition, okay? Because we work in different communities, different societies, so you'll find that it can mean a range of different things to different people. There is also various terms that are used that have similar meanings to community engagement. In some places, you'll find, terms as community outreach, community involvement, patient involvement, public participation. It is so varied. So not to, bog us down with definitions and terminologies, I felt that it would be helpful for me to refer you to visit the link below on this slide. And it's found on the MESH platform, where you can really get a deep dive into the definitions, the terms that are used. It will help you, appreciate the dynamism of the nature of work that we are involved in. And so I'll leave it at that for now, because I don't want to turn this into a lecture or a lesson or, a lesson. So we will get on to the next. So having quickly, looked at what do we mean by community engagement, and when you get time, please visit the MESH website, MESH platform. What exactly do we mean? What exactly do we mean when we talk about next level community engagement? And to look at that, I said, let's first understand next level community engagement. What is it not? And then quickly, what should it really be, or what is it? So the key issue is that when we talk about next level community engagement, it is not supposed to be ad hoc. It is not supposed to be a by the way. It is not supposed to be an add-on. And what does ad hoc or a simple add-on look like? When we look at what community engagement currently looks like, you will find that for the most part, it is either study specific. It is usually done at certain periods. So literally it has time limits. And then the most interesting one is that it is heavily reactive, or it majorly comes to play when we are responding to crisis. So that is not what we want when we start looking at next level community engagement. We don't want to be running around being reactive. We don't want to only do community engagement and involvement within a particular time, or apportion it a particular time when it should happen. We keep saying that it is continuous, and so it should not have particular time limits. And then the argument is that what we currently see or define as community engagement is heavily project specific or research specific. So when we get to what should community engagement or next level community engagement look like, or what should it be? There are two key issues here. The first is that it should become standard practice in research institutions. And when we talk about research institutions, there are research institutions that are standalone, but there are also research institutions that are part of universities. So we want to see that it becomes standard practice in both research institutions and universities. The other is that it should be integral in research. And integral in research is not just when we're conducting research, but we're looking at the overall strategies of organizations, of institutions, of universities, so that it becomes part of research culture. So that is what we are looking at when we talk about next level community engagement. What is it not, and what should it be? So when we look at the current funding landscape for community engagement, what is the picture that we see? We have basically seen that we are dealing with a mixed bag, of progress or partial progress, as well as noticeable voids. And what do I mean by this? What we talk about in terms of partial progress is that we are seeing more and more research institutions, research funders driving towards institutionalizing community engagement. And we can see that manifest in different forms. So we've seen that more funders are actually now in funding calls requiring proof of community engagement by including community engagement proposals in funding applications. So if a call is put out, one of the requirements for submission is that your funding application should include a community engagement proposal. The other thing that we see is that more and more review committees, as well as funding decision committees, are now including community engagement and involvement experts. And this is quite a shift from what has historically been happening. Previously, you would find that review committees would only focus on the science and maybe the institutional capacity strengthening aspects. But there was basically no participation of engagement experts to look at components around community engagement and involvement. So we see that that is really more, it's progressive in terms of how science has been done on the continent. The other thing that we see is that funders are now more and more calling for inclusion of community engagement as part of the theory of change in the work that we fund. So when we look at the meal frameworks, you find that there is more and more requirement to include indicators for community engagement. So this is, pointing us to the direction that we are actually witnessing progress. But we also know that not all funders are actually on board. There are funders who are, to use a very crude word, taking a backseat and deciding to do research just in terms of focusing on the science. There are those who actually then prefer to do engagement in different ways. And so we are also going to look at that in the next slide. So in this next slide, the question that I'm asking is, are funders therefore perpetuating existing narratives, of ad hoc community engagement, or shifting the paradigm? And I have an emphatic yes. We are seeing funders contributing to entrenching ad hoc or tokenism in community engagement. And how does this happen? One, we've seen that many funders prefer to fund proposals that are fully developed. You will find that calls for proposals will need research questions that are fully developed, research methodologies that are fully developed. And yet, on the other hand, when we talk about community engagement and involvement, we are calling for opportunities for communities to co-create or co-develop research agenda, research questions with researchers. So that in itself is a way of entrenching ad hoc community engagement, or tokenism in community engagement, if you would like to call it that. The other issue that I really say funders, we continue to perpetuate, existing narratives in this area, is that when we make funding available, for the most part, you'll find that funding for community engagement is heavily for the core research. And core research, I'm referring here to research, the research conduct stage. You will barely find funding that provides for pre-study activities or post-study closure activities or study closure activities. And yet when we look at pre-study activities, this is where a lot of relationship building happens. And then post-study is where we try to look at what are the sustainability mechanisms we should be looking at. So that is another way that we are entrenching ad hoc engagement. And then finally, we find that because of lack of clear guidance and even metrics to measure and evaluate community engagement, funders will decide to fund depending on what their preferences are. So you will see that we will have a lot of uneven funding practices. And what do I mean by this? You'll find that a funder who is really looking to embed community engagement will take initiative to include funding throughout the research life cycle, or to actually promote institutionalization of the practice. Whereas other funders might decide to say, my interest is in dissemination of results, or my interest is going to be in only engaging with a particular group, maybe policymakers, or maybe just work with the media so that we do not get any misreporting. And so because of this, we find that we are dealing a lot with uneven funding practices, because researchers are not speaking from the same page or from the same book. So how do we shift the paradigm then? I would say that this is going to necessitate starting with some of the systemic challenges that we see that have perpetuated ad hoc engagement. And it starts from as far as the research guidelines that, are supposed to guide the way we conduct research, global health research. If research guidelines are weak in language when it comes to community engagement and involvement, then the funder practices will also follow that particular guidance. So one of the things that we've seen and participated in is working closely with the WHO to see how we can continue to strengthen a lot of issues that we have realized have contributed to research waste. And this work is starting with clinical trials. The WHO guideline has taken lead in providing guidance for best practices. And there's a particular one that focuses on patient, community, and public engagement. And that is action 2 in the guidance. So from that, we've seen now funders coming together and issuing a joint statement on how they are going to strengthen clinical trials. This, like I have said, is focused on clinical trials first or for now. But we know that a lot of these practices begin with clinical trials and then spread out to the rest of the research, the other types of research. So we're optimistic that what we are seeing in the clinical trial field will then begin to spill into other research areas. So what I'm showing on this slide is basically to say that, one, The way we are shifting the paradigm is by, first of all, looking at the guidance, global regulatory or research guidance, and how it speaks to community engagement and involvement in research. In this case, we are starting with clinical trials. Now, we have started seeing that because the language there has been strengthened, funders, global funders, continental funders are now following suit in making sure that they begin to align with the global guidance. The link that I have shared here is a link to the funder statement that was released on the 25th. I think it was the 25th of September this year. And in this statement, we have 14 research funders committing to, among other things, ensure that they actually begin to strengthen the way they fund and support patient, community, and public engagement. And this includes Science for Africa Foundation. So we are saying that, yes, even though we have seen that funders have perpetuated in one way or another, or contributed to entrenching existing narratives in terms of ad hoc community engagement, we are seeing a shift, a positive shift towards making sure that they institutionalize the practice so that we start having community and public engagement, or community engagement and involvement, as standard practice in the way we conduct research. And with that, I would like to come to an end, and thank you for listening. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Lillian, for giving us a broad picture on community engagement in research as a standard of practice from a funder's perspective. Next, I'm going to call upon Biggie Zero. We are going to have a slight change. We will have Mr. Biggie Zero come before Cherewa. And after Mr. Biggie Zero, we will have Professor Judith Kamoto. So first to go will be Mr. Biggie Zero. So Biggie is a research program manager and community engagement professional, currently based in Zimbabwe at the University of Zimbabwe. He is a current program manager and public engagement with science lead for African Mental Health Research Initiative, that is AMARI2, a mental health research capacity building program that builds on the initial AMARI1, which ran from 2015 to 2022. Over the years, Zero has led engagement initiatives in multiple sectors that include mental health, environment and climate change, agriculture, and COVID-19. His interests are in contemporary approaches for engaging people with lived experience in research. Biggie will be talking about pathways to institutionalizing community engagement in research. Welcome, Biggie.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Waila. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Good evening from wherever you are joining us from. As Waila said, I'm Biggie Zero. I'm with the African Mental Health Research Initiative. Thanks, Lillian, for setting the tone. So I'll be talking from a research support personnel. Lillian talked about the funders' perspective. So I'll be coming in to share pathways to institutionalizing community engagement in research from a research support perspective. Okay. Which basically is part of the research support team in community engagement. The roles really being to be a bridge between funders, institutions, communities, and researchers. So in this support, we ensure that our programs, such as the African Mental Health Research Initiative, has a sound community engagement strategy in these efforts to institutionalize community engagement. So as we try to understand why community engagement is still not a standard practice in research, I thought it's important to touch on the research area, which really matters in community engagement. Because community engagement, I think, as Lillian said, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. area of research determines the community engagement approach. For example, the work that we are doing in mental health research, there is now a strong need for community engagement because the interventions that our researchers are working on, they need to be context-specific, culturally appropriate. Hence, there is need for strong community engagement in the work that we are doing. And also, there is a huge global shift in mental health care, which is seeing deinstitutionalization of mental health institutions to community-based mental health. So this is to your local clinics, workplace mental health. I think workplace mental health is really huge now. So our researchers, this is enabling them to do more of community engagement in terms of it as a practice. So in terms of it being not a one-size-fits-all, the way you do community engagement in mental health will differ from how you do it in other disciplines. That could be HIV research, that could be malaria research, be it in biostatistics. So this was just to give an appreciation of the field and the areas of research. So just in terms of the whole comprehensive mental health action plan, the community-based a major objective is to provide comprehensive mental health and social care services in community-based settings, with a specific target to double the number of community-based mental health facilities in 80% of the countries by 2030. So this is just to add on to why there is growing interest in mental health research for community engagement. Then to help us understand and why community engagement is not yet at next level, as we try to have community engagement at next level, I'll look into some of the barriers and also the pathways. So in terms of the barriers, there is absence or lack of formal institutional community engagement frameworks or policies. So this is really sort of a barrier to this. Even though in most African institutions, students are encouraged to embed community engagement in their research, most institutions have no clear community engagement guidelines. For example, I will refer to the African Mental Health Research Initiative, where I've been involved in community engagement since 2018. When we did our due diligence, we checked on all the other systems and all the policies to check if they are in place. But in terms of community engagement now at institutional level, all those 6 African partner institutions, they do not have formal policies and or guidelines, even SOPs, standard operating procedures to guide implementation of community engagement. These are missing, so there is a huge gap in that area. Then in terms of also community engagement not being part of the institutional PhD curriculum, it's not valued as an academic output. By this, I'm just referring to some of the curricula. For example, our curricula on PhDs. We have courses that we offer at the introductory stage. Community engagement is not part of that curricula. Then there is also none or lack of dedicated community engagement support staff. Community engagement often falls under the communications department. So this is common across, I can refer to other Deltas institutions which are funded by Science for Africa. This is something that we have noted and something that's relevant across most of these programs, where the communications department is the one that supports community engagement. Then there's also weak incentives for researchers in terms of performance evaluation, promotion, and recognition. There is really little recognition of community engagement that can motivate researchers or faculty to engage in community engagement in the work that they are doing. Then in terms of also the ethical review processes from working with the fellows and supporting the community engagement work that they are doing. These processes, they tend to also frustrate the researchers in most of our African institutions because we have, for example, new ethics applications. They can go for up to 3 months, and an amendment can go for up to a month. So this tends to not motivate the researchers. Then in terms of the pathways that are linked to this lack of formal institutional CE frameworks or policies, these are some of the pathways that I think from that experience can really help as we try to institutionalize community engagement as a practice, and not just as an obligation that we need to do out of moral value. So part of it includes developing institutional community engagement frameworks and toolkits. I should applaud Science for Africa on this. They have a community engagement guide that they released recently. So I think it's also on efforts to sensitize on these community engagement toolkits, guidelines, so that researchers are aware that we have such toolkits that can guide them when they do community engagement. Then also have dedicated community engagement staff. Also incentives for community engagement outcomes, e.g. promotions in faculties, recognition awards. These will motivate the researchers to really see value in the work that they are doing, in community engagement, in the work that they are doing. Then in terms of programs such as Amari, which support research and have curricula that they have to build capacity of fellows. This applies to to all the Delta's programs. I think just embedding community engagement in that PhD curricula, have it as at the beginning with the introductory courses. This might be also helpful. Then also expedite institutional ethical review processes. This will go a long way in terms of institutionalizing community engagement and really strengthening these efforts to have community engagement really recognized in this process. Then also include community engagement right at the beginning when the researchers are conceptualizing their topics and the research design, to avoid amendments on protocols or new ethics applications. So this, I think, will also be really helpful. Then CE, community engagement, is often viewed as an add-on. I think Lillian touched on this, why researchers view community engagement as an add-on, as an additional burden. So these are some of the barriers and gaps. From the fellowship application, when we send out the call for applications, there is a they lack a clearly defined section on community engagement. So we have all the other sections that are needed on the methodology, on the research questions, but it lacks a clear section on community engagement. Then also researchers view community engagement as an optional add-on. So whether or not you do community engagement, you'll still get your PhD. So they tend to now, why do community engagement when I can still graduate whether or not I do community engagement? They focus on the PhD requirements, such as the publications. For most institutions across Africa, we require two publications and a thesis, so they tend to focus on that. Then also community engagement is often perceived as an additional time-consuming task that adds on to the already demanding workload of PhD research. So there is already an existing workload. They are trying to balance work-life balance. Then there is community engagement. That's how they sort of view it as an as additional and time-consuming. So then it leaves really passion rather than institutional mandate for researchers to engage in community engagement. That's been the case in working with most of the researchers. The researchers that we work with that are keen on community engagement, it's really out of their passion to engage communities rather than institutional mandate. Then in terms of the pathways that could help in this, we could consider including community engagement on the PhD call for applications, so that it's not an add-on. The researchers include it from the start. They know that if I'm to get this PhD fellowship, I should do community engagement, as they work also on their research objectives, include an objective on community engagement. That way it's tied to the PhD research, and not just an extension of the PhD research. In this regard, also, I think the total fellowship budget for the fellowship should include a protected community engagement budget, so that when these fellowships are awarded, the fellow knows that there is a protected budget for community engagement that cannot be moved to support other research costs, but it is dedicated to community engagement. I think if funders and institutions work on that, that would also be helpful. Then Lillian touched on this in terms of research projects should demonstrate a strong community engagement component to qualify for funding, when she noted that it's one of the things that some funders are now looking into. They want a strong component on community engagement in order for your application to be considered for funding. Then in terms of capacity building, which is what most of our programs are doing, capacity building in research, in the science, researchers like training in community engagement. So there is really lack of understanding of what really is community engagement. Most researchers, we have noted from this practice, they confuse it with awareness campaigns, which are characterized by top-down flow of information. So there is really that need to build capacity of our researchers in community engagement. Then there is also few professional community engagement practitioners in institutions. I think I mentioned this earlier, where the communications department is coming in to support community engagement. Then community engagement is just basically undervalued as non-scientific work, which does not require special skills, where then communities are seen as research subjects, not partners. So in terms of the pathways that could help this, I think build researcher capacity engagement methods, capacity building not only for fellows, but also for the co-investigators for the grant, so that they know what to look out for when they put out the calls for application. Then there is issues to do with funding and sustainability. There is limited funding for community engagement. Usually when budgets are cut, community engagement is the first to have cuts. Then also when the researchers are doing their budgets, there is no community engagement budget. Then there is lack of continuity. Community engagement efforts rarely scaled when a project cycle comes to an end. So do the community engagement efforts. I can make reference to one of the to our community engagement grant in our first phase, the Articulate grant. It closed with the grant. So we should allocate specific budgets for community engagement. Science for Africa have seed grants, so are some of the funders. So these efforts really help in terms of sustaining community engagement as a practice. Then strengthen community engagement monitoring processes. I think Lillian also touched this. Then as also community engagement practitioners, there is a really strong need for documenting the processes so that we showcase the community engagement impact and value to ensure that this attracts funding. So it's also a call for the researchers who are in community engagement to ensure that their work is documented, it's shared, leverage digital spaces, leverage digital spaces for sharing the work that you are doing for sustained funding. Then also just encourage funders to sustain engagement. So I think in closing, as we try to understand why community engagement is still not a standard practice in research, we should move from tokenism to transformation, move from ticking boxes to real engagement. Community engagement should evolve from just being a moral obligation to being a recognized scientific and institutional standard. So I think that will help in terms of the efforts that are being done for community engagement to be institutionalized. Thank you. Thank you. I will stop here.
Thank you very much, Ms. Abigi, for sharing with us your perspectives from a research manager point of view. We appreciate your presentation. Next, we are going to have Professor Judith Kamoto. And sincere apologies. In the poster that was shared, Professor Kamoto was omitted by error. But Professor Judith Kamoto is a forestry and natural resources manager expert at the Lilongwe University of Agriculture and Natural Resources, abbreviated as Luana in Malawi. Her work focuses on community forestry, gender, climate change adaptation, and sustainable natural resource governance. She has led and contributed to numerous research and policy initiatives promoting inclusive and environmental management and rural livelihoods. Professor Kamoto is recognized for her leadership in advancing gender equity and capacity strengthening within the forestry and environmental sciences sectors in Malawi and beyond. Judith will be talking about the role of research leadership in embedding community engagement in research beyond ad hoc efforts. Welcome, Judith.
Thank you very much, Waila. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I've already been introduced, so I'll take you through my presentation. Next, we have heard what community engagement is from Lillian and from Biggie, but I will just emphasize that community engagement is vital in research for inclusive and sustainable outcomes. If we really want sustainability in terms of the interventions that we do at community level, whether in agriculture, natural resource management, health, whatever research we do that affects human beings, I think community engagement is important for sustainability. So our university, Luana, for a very long time have emphasized on participatory approaches to research because those participatory approaches strengthen the link between researchers and farming communities. Being an agricultural university, we are always working with farmers. And sometimes it's a confusion that participatory approaches means community engagement. And within our university, we have a department of extension, which deals with communities on a daily basis, sharing messages with them, advocating for agriculture, giving them new varieties, new issues that are appearing in the global world. But that is not community engagement. So for me, who has gone through a community engagement concept as part of what we need to do when we are undertaking research, from design to implementation, I see communities not just as beneficiaries of research, they are partners in discovery. So when we design our research from the word go, when you see a call from a funder, whether it's a call for research or a call for scholarship or a call for master's or PhD scholarship, already you should be thinking, how am I going to embed community engagement in the proposal that I will write or that I will design? And then already think about doing an exploratory research before you actually submit the proposal, so that you go and engage the community on the subject matter that you want to write the proposal for. And in that way, it means that the communities are included at the onset of your ideas, so that you can together discover the things that you want to do or the things that you want to research on. They are part and parcel of your journey. And research innovations will depend on community validation and their participation. So this is what I've learned through the process of community engagement, of which I've just learned recently from Science Foundation for Africa under the DERAS 2 program, which we are part of the Critical Zone Africa consortium. So for me and for us at Ruana, community engagement ensures research outputs that are relevant and locally adaptable. I know that within the institution, maybe and elsewhere, over 70% of research projects involve direct community participation or farmer participation. But the question, as I've said earlier on, is at what point? At what point are we engaging the community, or are we allowing the community to participate? So I'll repeat this as I present, that it's important to engage the community at the onset so that you are together on a journey of discovering what you want to research on. Next. So as a leader, a professor within a team that we are working on, we have gone through this process of understanding what community engagement is. I wrote a proposal on community engagement under the CZA consortium, DERAS 2 project, that we are going to engage our community so that we can co-create together content that can bring awareness about the issues that we are grappling with in terms of managing our forest reserve. And that proposal included radio as a means to communicate. But for me as a leader, to achieve that within our consortium, it meant that I should have a vision. Strategically, I needed to stand so that my team, researchers and research fellows, understood what community engagement is all about. So strategic integration is one of the key issues as readers, as principal investigators of research that includes communities. We should have that strategic integration so that our research strategies are moving beyond just the ad hoc efforts to a systematic approach. Because what has been happening is that you get a call for proposals, you apply, you undertake your research, you go to the communities participate, but at the end, you just go with your outreach activities. It's like dissemination. You want to give them the results because at some point you collected the data from them. So that doesn't really help the communities because they are only at the receiving end. So the picture you see is one of our efforts to engage the community we are working with so that we work together on that journey. And one needs to be strategic about integrating communities in your work. We also need to have a cultural shift. Leaders need to foster a culture of community engagement, valuing and recognizing its importance in research. This cultural shift is important because as researchers, we are working in different fields. Some work in the lab, but whatever they do in the lab can affect communities, like in the health sector, developing probably STI, sexually transmitted infections, things like condoms and stuff. We need to engage those people that will use them, not just bring them at the end. So that cultural shift that I work in the lab, I work with communities, or I work with the students alone, all that, if your work will have an impact on communities, we need to shift our culture as a leader who is supposed to bring in community engagement. We also need institutional support. As a leader within a research group, you might be working like me in an environment which is a university. So I have my vice chancellor, but they need to understand what I want to do. The previous speaker said we don't have community engagement as a framework that has been institutionalized in our systems. So for us to institutionalize that, we need support from our leaders. We need to allocate resources and provide infrastructure for community engagement. We also need to partner with others, collaborate with development organizations, development partners, even community organizations that work locally in that field where we are working, so that then we ensure a long-term collaboration so that our efforts are sustainable. Next. We also need to build the capacity of the people that we are working with, the communities themselves, but in our case, it's the research team in the CCDA team, including research fellows, masters and PhD students. For this one, I will emphasize, this is based on my experience. We spent 1 year trying to impress upon research fellows or our masters and PhD students to include community engagement in their work, in their proposals, even asking them to have an objective of community engagement in their work. But over time, it was impossible because the PhD students, they have their own theoretical frameworks that they're working on, and these two things were not marrying. And we asked a lot of questions about what is the problem? Why is it that the students are not understanding what community engagement is? And then we reached out to SFA to have a capacity building session with our students and other researchers. After that training, after that capacity building exercise, we were able to make sure that the students were able to engage or understand what community engagement is. We also need to monitor and evaluate as leaders, establish mechanisms for monitoring and evaluating community engagement so that there is continuous improvement. We need to incentivize engagement. Leaders, we need to incentivize community engagement, recognizing and rewarding researchers and community members for their efforts. I think the previous speaker also said the same thing, that we need to recognize people in our systems that are engaging with communities, or they are using the CE concept in their work. So the key message here is that research leadership plays a critical role in embedding community engagement in research. So we need to move beyond these ad hoc efforts so that we can sustain and improve in what we are doing. Next. I'll quickly go through the slides. So strategies at project level, we are saying that we need to co-create research priorities with farmer associations, like you see in the pictures. This is at the beginning of our work. And you see the other guy near the bag, sitting on a green chair, is recording what we are talking about so that we can go back, listen, and continue the co-creation with the communities. We need to employ participatory data collection, like you see in the pictures, include community representatives, and utilize digital tools for ongoing dialogue and dissemination, just like the picture and the green guy sitting on the green chair. Next. At the institutional level, we need to develop a formal community engagement framework. My colleague has already said this. We need to incentivize community engagement in funding and in research evaluation criteria. We need to build partnerships with NGOs and local authorities, and we need to offer community engagement training to researchers and students. So this is just emphasizing the point that these stages or these steps can help us embrace community engagement as a concept. Next. Of course, there are impediments to institutionalizing community engagement. Limited funding and short project cycles sometimes can be an impediment. Absence of university-wide community engagement policy or guidelines, like my colleague said. CE activities not formally recognized in promotions or appraisals within university settings. Like at Luana, I'm rewarded if I do outreach activities. So I do all my research at the end. I choose a community where I want to disseminate, or I go back to the community where I collected my data and disseminate. If I do outreach, they will reward me. They will give me points. But to check that from the onset of my project, from project design up to implementation, I engaged communities, that is not recognized. And I think this is something that we need to be doing moving forward. Also, within institutions like university settings, there is weak interdepartmental coordination. As a result, probably community engagement will stay in the Department of Extension, but it will not go to other departments. Yet, each and every department does research. So there's a need that we coordinate. Next. There are benefits for community engagement. These include increased research relevance and adoption, the issue of sustainability, that whatever you do will stay in the community because the community co-created with you. Also, there's experiential learning outcomes for our students. This I can testify from the experience that we have gone through our project. And also, the farmers, the community see that the research is theirs. It's not yours, but it's theirs because they took part. So continuous feedback and respect for indigenous knowledge from the communities will drive success in as far as this concept is concerned in research. Next. So to conclude, I'm recommending that we need to formalize community engagement policies within research governance structures. We need to establish community engagement performance metrics in project evaluations. We need to provide dedicated funding and capacity building for community engagement initiatives. And we need to promote cross-disciplinary community engagement collaborations so that all fields of research are involved in community engagement kind of work. And in conclusion, I'm saying that community engagement is a cornerstone for impactful agricultural research at Rwanda and the globe at large. And transitioning from research for communities to research with communities is the way to go. And therefore, we need to sustain these institutional issues so that we deepen society impact. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Kamoto. We really appreciate you sharing on your view as a research leader. So next we are going to have our final presenter, and I'm delighted to introduce Cherewa Akwamwa Boateng, who is a public engagement officer for the West Africa Center for Cell Biology of Infectious Pathogen, abbreviated as WACBIP, of the University of Ghana. She has years of experience in the design, implementation, management, and knowledge translation of public health interventions, especially using culturally appropriate communication in low-income settings. As a public engagement officer, she creates avenues for interactions between scientists, hard-to-reach communities, at-risk groups, and relevant stakeholders in the health sector. She also plans to execute engagement activities to disseminate information about the center. She's a two-time winner of the German-based Falling Walls Engage initiative. Cherewa will be talking about science in action, strengthening public health through community perspectives. Welcome, Cherewa.
Hi, everyone. Hope you can hear me very well. Yeah, so my name is Chirwa Boati, and I'm the Community and Public Engagement Officer for a center called West African Center for Cell Biology of Infectious Pathogens at the University of Ghana. And today I'll be talking about science in action and strengthening public health through community partnerships. And as it has already been said, why community engagement is still not standard in practice. So my work, I've been involved, community engagement has been central to my work in bridging science and in communities for the past 7 years now. And it's been something that I have learned and then discovered. It's been an experience. And about how community engagement drives communities to understand what we do as scientists. And even in spite of all these, there is still the bridge and there's still a gap of what works and what holds us back, and also what needs to be changed. Okay, so please to the next slide. Okay. So I think previous speakers have already spoken about all these things on why community engagement is very important, and the need to drive community engagement for the people that we interact with. So as I initially said, I just can't think, I think for the whole of the University of Ghana, I think the one that actually has been officially been given a title as a community engagement officer or a public engagement officer that is actually in charge of driving what the center does. So my center actually does research into infectious diseases, non-communicable disease, genetic diseases, and a whole lot. I think being given the position as a community engagement officer actually drives what the center actually does. And with a master student of over 200 master students so far working with them, and then PhD students of more than 100 PhD students, I think it's been an experience of trying to make them understand the need and the reason why community engagement should be part of their research. It's not only getting about their PhD, but also helping people to make informed health choices, and also building trust and understanding and making the lives of the communities that they do research in understand what exactly they do. So please to the next slide, please. Yeah. So our previous speakers have already spoken about the reason for or the importance of bringing community engagement, making it institutionalized in institutions, and also brought up some challenges and how to actually make these challenges be seen and known, and how to help bring solutions to them. Please, can you go to the next slide? Yes. So for my work, there's actually the need for, as previous presenters have said, the need for funding, institutional support, and also the lack of time. For my interaction with most of our researchers, community engagement is seen as a soft work. They're seen as passion-driven rather than policy-driven. they actually see it as part of their work that needs to be done, but not actually that needs to actually bring impact into the communities. So it's been years of trying to bring success and also recounting and trying to understand, help our researchers to understand the need to actually engage communities that are around us and where research is also usually taken. And also some of the reasons that has already been brought out are the time pressures, limited training or confidence in engagement skills, cultural barriers, and also the absence of evaluating engagement impact. Please can we go to the next slide? Okay, so for my work at WACPEP has been to develop and also help our researchers to understand the need to involve community engagement at their work. So we work with, we co-create initiatives with schools, communities, NGO, to the extent that we actually create toolkits that are being co-created by the communities that we engage and then our researchers to actually use these toolkits or science communication toolkits that actually help push the work of our community engagement activities. So most of these toolkits are actually developed or co-created in partnership with community members, advisory groups, market queens, drama production groups, and a whole lot. And most of these are also spearheaded by traditional heads, clinicians, and key members of our research communities who take ownership of our research activities. So in order to make these very understandable and very understandable, down to earth, and to also go back to my topic of science in action, we don't only try to do science, but then we also make it into actionable bits, as I said, in creating toolkits. So for example, we have developed a community engagement toolkit, which is a 25 minutes long docudrama to engage deaf students, deaf families, or hearing impaired families, for them to understand the science that we do. It's like, going out, engaging communities on the infectious diseases and then also the genetics that we do at the center. It's been very difficult trying to get persons who are hard of hearing to understand the science that we do. So then we came up with a solution of making this very actionable, having something tangible to help in disseminating our research results, and also bringing them on board to understand what we do. So, for example, and I also wanted to make my slides very picturing. So as you can see, there are some pictures of different various of community engagement activities with chiefs and also the public, with school children, trying to just disseminate what we do. Please, can we move to the next slide? Yeah, so as I was initially saying, for engaging persons who are hard of hearing is quite sensitive. So with the development of the toolkits, we believe that we get feedback from them and then how to actually explain to them the genetics of deafness and going back to them for sample collection and bringing them on board, explaining the bits of why, as researchers, we go to the communities and take blood samples. In most communities here, in Ghana, culturally, we know blood is sacred. And there is a community also, which is called Adamodo, which has about 50% of the population being deaf. So such a community is of high interest to us as researchers, trying to get their consent or trying to engage them as to why such a situation or such thing is seen in the community. So it takes a selection and a planning process. And this brings me to how we choose and then design our community engagement activities. Yeah, so we look at it based on our needs driven, which is based on the priorities or the prioritized groups that we have identified. So in this case, for instance, looking at hearing impaired persons and how we can bring them on board to identify and also to understand why such a situation is happening in such a community, and also identifying key partners in such communities, school heads, and market associations, and a whole lot, and also co-creation and workshops. As I've already said, we discuss themes and also preferably using drama, radio programs, and also TV programs. And one thing I've realized with radio programs is that whilst engaging, you need to get feedback from people who are calling in to also to ask questions and also ask get better explanation of what you are doing. So getting feedback from them on the number of calls and then on the number of after calls that we receive, trying to get clarifications in a moment. And also piloting and also piloting feedback is also one of the ways that we use in engaging, trying to get small scale trials before scaling across communities. And please go into the next slide. So how we have been funded. Funding has been it's been one of the major challenges that we have identified in our community engagement activities. Fortunately for my center, we are being funded by Wellcome Trust and Deltas Africa. And then also sometimes for our community engagement activities that PhD students or master students or any researcher at the center wants to undertake, we get funding sometimes in small bits from NGOs and also other institutions who are interested in partnering with us, and also from micro grants and also cost sharing partnerships with some institutions that are also able to come on board for our programs. Please to the next slide. Okay, so this going back to one of our success community engagement toolkits that have been developed. As I initially said, as a science communication toolkit that our researchers use anytime they are going to engage a deaf community or deaf persons or hearing impaired persons. It comes as a handy video or an interactive video that they can show and also get understanding. So there is let's say a sign language one, and also it has been translated into different local languages for family members of the hard of hearing persons to also understand all these things. So it's called A Smile of Hope. It can be found on our website on WACPPUG. You can actually go there and then have a feel of it yourself. So we do this, we don't do this separately, we actually do this as a multidisciplinary group of people that actually comes together on all our major community engagement toolkits that we have. And so far, we have 2 community engagement toolkit. We have one also on COVID-19 animations for children under 10 years, and for teenagers, for school-going children, and also for adults. So we try to decentralize these things to make it very easy to understand. The signs are broken up into smaller language for people that we usually engage with to easily understand what we do. This is the next slide. Yes, so these are some of the pictures that are being shown. You can actually, and it's been an interesting and a learning process for researchers who actually engage, and for the communities that engage, whereby they are learning and unlearning what to use, the right language to use, the appropriate language to use when engaging people who are hard of hearing, the minority groups, and how to actually report or evaluate the impact of all these community engagement activities. Please see the next slide. Okay. So that is not all. And in implementing all these things, we use different, apart from the toolkits that we have also brought on board, we use different means, open science and festivals, STEM outreaches, community screening, which we engaging daily in. Please to the next slide. Here. So one challenge too that most researchers at our center actually identified was getting feedback.
Hi, Terewa.
Hi.
I would appreciate if you can wind up
Sure.
because of time. Thank you.
Yeah. So these are some of how we assess the impact of our programs using all these follow-ups, getting focus group discussions, and also surveys, trying to get their feedback from all programs and all community outreaches or community engagement activities. Please see the next slide. So I want to say that engagement must be integrated, not isolated, and also it needs to be consistent. And also it should be inclusive, disability friendly, and everything that needs to bring in the disabled, and then inclusive, to make it inclusive and understanding for the minority group to also understand. And also it takes time, trust must be built, and also not assumed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cherewa, for sharing your experience implementing community engagement. And thank you to all presenters. We will now move to the Q&A session, whereby we will only have 5 minutes. Thank you for putting your questions on the Q&A box. Some of them have already been responded to. And also thank you for your comments. Kindly note that you're only going to take a question or two, and all the other questions will be responded to by the panels in writing, and that will be shared with you. So I would like to pose a question that has been asked by one of the participants. And the question is, I am not sure why community engagement is more affiliated with community departments. Meanwhile, there is far more than just communication with stakeholders. Based on experience, what should be a standard or near standard profile for staff working in community engagement? And then the next question is, could you make a comment on the community-led research, moving from communities as research partners to communities as research leads? How do we make this a reality? Or can this even become a reality? What value would be ascribed to products or outputs of community-led research? And finally, there's a request for Lillian to share on how Science for Africa Foundation announces their calls for applications for funding of community engagement. Any of the speakers is free to unmute and respond to the questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Well, I think I'll go first. I'll attempt the question on communities owning the research, which I think really it starts from involving the communities in project conception. Involve them as you do your research questions. If you involve communities at such an early stage, and involve them throughout the project life cycle, I think it will be easier for the community to now have ownership of the project, even when you are done with your research, be it a PhD. So I would just say have them co-own the project, build their capacity, have trainings, have workshops, build their capacity. You have your community advisory boards, build their capacity so that they are sort of also co-investigators on the research, so such that when you are handing over the project to them, there is sustainability. We have projects that have continued after the initial project lifespan through that. I will stop there.
Okay. Thanks, Biggie. I will just quickly like to jump in. Being able to have communities participate as co-creators of research, I would quickly say that this is one of the biggest challenges we face, especially when we come to health research or global health research. You find that researchers find it challenging to relinquish power to communities, to be able to co-create or co-develop. We have seen a different shift when it comes to other areas of research, for instance, agriculture, where Prof. Kamoto is. It's a lot easier to actually co-create with communities. Similarly, when we're looking at climate sciences, we see that happening a lot. You know, engagement is a continuum. There are stages. So we are now trying to build capacity for researchers to appreciate the different stages, you know, from simply providing information or raising awareness to actually moving, because what we see a lot is information and consultation. So now we're encouraging and supporting researchers to begin to really meaningfully engage and involve, and then hopefully, especially in global health research, get to the level of empowerment. Because I think the biggest challenge researchers face is that what if the communities say that this is not our priority is something different, then will the researcher shift or change their research questions? So being able to walk that journey with them and enable them see the value of how to approach this. So these are some of the things that we're doing at Science for Africa Foundation when we speak about capacity strengthening. It's not something that we can talk about and dissect right now in detail, but it's part of the capacity strengthening initiatives that we're doing to be able to help and support researchers walk that journey. And then how do we announce funding calls for community engagement? Currently, our funding is restricted to our grant partners across our initiatives. So we do not have any open calls. But I know that there are different funders globally who have an interest in funding community engagement. And I believe that the MESH platform has a particular section where they actually highlight some of these funding groups or research funders who fund research in specifically community engagement to support research. So please visit the MESH platform and look for that link. You will find it there. I don't remember the other question, Waila.
The other question was why, and maybe I'll only give a minute for this, why most of the time when you talk of engagement, people want to think of it as communication. So you find it is people in communication who are doing it. Thank you.
All right. I will give it a quick shot, and I hope we can have parting shots. It's really a misunderstanding in the field. Even among practitioners, you will find that people assume that if you're a communicator, if you're a journalist, if you are, you know, you do communication, then you can definitely do community engagement, which is not accurate. There's different skill sets that are required. And again, I go back to the issue of capacity strengthening. We are working to be able to support researchers, research leaders, institutions, to be able to delineate the differences. You can be able to build capacity of a communicator to be able to understand how to engage, and vice versa. But the two are different, even though there are areas where the two can work collaboratively. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, Lillian, for those responses, as well as Biggie, and to also the rest of the speakers. I know we would have loved to take all the questions and have responses, but as I earlier alluded to, we are going to compile responses to all the questions that were put in the Q&A box and share. Finally, we would appreciate your feedback on today's webinar through the Global Health Network Survey. Your input helps us to assess how well the event met your learning needs, improve future sessions, and understand what you've gained. Thank you for your participation in this webinar, and thank you to the panel. We have received many comments and questions, like I've said. We are going to respond to them. Please don't keep your questions because of the time restriction. The recording of this session, along with additional materials, will also be shared. The link to where you'll be able to find this will be posted in the chat now. Thank you very much to the panelists and to you for your participation. We will now close with this session. Thank you very much.